I did not do fellowship with Dr. Abdullah. I didn't do residency with Dr. Abdullah, but I know him professionally as well as in Palm Springs. And as a bariatric surgeon, I had the privilege and honor of seeing many of my patients who could not conceive at an obese weight conceive post-bariatric surgery. So over 100 patients we've seen post-bariatric surgery grow healthy families and healthy babies. Also, we also see the problems associated with obesity with the weight-related comorbidities. So I think it's a very timely talk about obesity as it is really a global epidemic. So my disclosures, I'm a proctor for Intuitive. A little bit about obesity here. So Americans are the leaders of many things, and we need to be proud of that, but unfortunately we're the leaders of obesity. Approximately 42%, that's a staggering number of Americans are considered overweight or obese. And this results in a pretty staggering economic burden to the healthcare system. About $150 billion per year is allocated to the treatment of weight-related comorbidities. Another alarming statistic we're seeing is the incidence of childhood and adolescent obesity. So we're seeing a near doubling and tripling of childhood and adolescent obesity over the last few decades. So about 15% of children and adolescents are overweight or obese. And this is a problem because obesity is a vicious cycle where we see children become parents, and obese parents we know go on to produce obese children. Another staggering statistic is 51%. When I was doing some research on this talk, 51% of pregnant American women are considered overweight or obese at the time of conception. So that's pretty alarming. When we talk a little bit about obesity, there's a couple key terms I think all of us know it, BMI. And what BMI is your body mass index. It's your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. It's misleading at times because it doesn't take into consideration many things like muscle mass as well as bone density, but is a good indicator of cardiovascular risk and obesity. So when we look at obesity trends in the US, obesity is really kind of growing at a very alarming rate. Over the last 4 or 5 decades, obesity for both adult and children has been increasing almost exponentially. And despite the awareness, we have National Obesity Day, political administrations, despite the awareness of obesity, we're not slowing the trends of obesity. And what we're seeing is by 2030, almost 50% of the US is going to be considered overweight or obese. So these are very kind of alarming, staggering numbers. The problem is that the prevalence and incidence of obesity is growing very, very quickly, almost a double-fold within a decade of obesity. And when we look at obesity, obesity is not a quality of life issue, it's not a cosmetic issue, it's a disease, just like cancer is considered a disease. And to put things in perspective, obesity takes more lives than breast and colon cancer combined. So what we see is that clinicians usually talk to their patients about mammography, breast self-exams, colonoscopy, yet obesity takes more lives than breast and colon cancer combined, more than 100 to 300,000 lives per year. Am I doing this wrong? Let's see, okay. So when we look at obesity, obesity is really kind of something that is a sign of the times. As technology is advancing, things are getting smaller. Our phones are getting smaller, our TVs are getting smaller, yet our waistlines are getting bigger. And this is a reality. What we're also seeing is a very strong link between screen time and pediatric obesity. So the longer your kids are on the phone or on the TV, the higher incidence of obesity. So again, obesity is a disease. It's not a cosmetic thing. It's not I can't fit in my bikini or I don't look good in my dress. It's a disease. Just like breast cancer and heart disease is a disease, so is obesity. And again, it's the second most common cause of death from modifiable behavior, only secondary to smoking. So smoking takes more lives. When we look at the link between obesity and comorbidities, we see almost an exponential and linear relationship between the BMI for both men and women for diabetes. We're also seeing numerous weight-related comorbidities associated with obesity. So the obesity affects the body as a whole. We see things like intracranial hypertension, cardiovascular disease, cataracts, strokes, diabetes, dyslipidemia, high blood pressure. One of the kind of things we don't know is that there's a very strong link between obesity and cancer across the board. Every cancer, there's a higher risk of developing that cancer when you're overweight than normal weight. We're not sure why. We think obesity is a chronic inflammatory state where you release a lot of inflammatory mediators and it's a pro-carcinogenic kind of media, but we're also seeing things like venous stasis disease, respiratory issues such as obstructive sleep apnea. We're also seeing higher anesthetic rates of complications. Heavier patients have higher anesthetic rates, whether it's a gallbladder, tubal ligation, hysterectomy, whatever it is. Heavier patients have higher rates of anesthetic-related complications. Another thing we're seeing is fatty liver disease, so non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. This is kind of a big deal because viral hepatitis usually was the #1 cause of liver transplantation in the U.S. Now, NASH is becoming the #1 cause of liver transplantation in the U.S. for women. Alcohol liver disease is #1 cause for liver transplantation in men. But again, this is becoming a big deal.